What an opportunity!
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. I'm Gooey, joined by McKenna.
Hello.
We're joined by people who we just saw last month, and we're excited to have them back. We got Jamie. How's it going, buddy?
Yes, all good, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much again. I know it's the evening in the UK, so I much appreciate the time difference again.
Yes, no, it works out perfectly. We're recording that right now on a fine Sunday afternoon. We've had a chill day, so
nice.
And we're also joined by Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
It's great to have you both back. We don't even have to go through it. We know your qualifications, your expert Nintendo 64 qualifications. But before we even really get into the game topic at hand, I figured we could just talk about it right away. We're talking about soccer or football once again this episode. We've previously covered FIFA 64, I believe it was called. And we established that I don't really know much about it. McKenna does. McKenna played soccer. Ryan, are you a big soccer fan?
Wouldn't say big, but it's
Okay.
been part of my life in a few different ways. Like, I played in middle school. I think you may be familiar with AYSO, which is a youth soccer organization that's very, very prominent in the Midwest in the late 90s, early 2000s. I played for that, and I also played for my school team as well. And then I got into like role-playing games and punk rock and did not play sports anymore in high school.
Pretty much same, yeah.
But when I met my wife, she we were still living in Chicago at the time, and she had Chicago Fire, the Major League Soccer team there. She had season tickets, so I started to kind of go to games with her when we were dating. And then when we moved to Denver here, we got season tickets to Colorado Rapids. And I think we had those for like 3 years. So we would go see a lot of MLS games. So
that's sweet.
We stopped obviously during the pandemic, and we haven't actually gone back since, but it's something we always talk about doing.
You think you might someday?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love get back on there.
I love going and seeing a good footy match.
Yeah, I had a similar backstory to you, where like those other things took control of my life. But like with any sport, pretty much, like if I'm there, I'll usually have a good time watching it.
Yeah.
So Jamie, I know, I already know you are like you are a massive soccer fan. I feel like, I couldn't even comprehend some of the things you were saying.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's difficult in the UK to find people that aren't into football. When I say football, I mean soccer. For anybody kind of listening,
yes,
just in general.
We have it again. But it's like the Lilac Wars. Like we can't name things the same.
Exactly. Yeah, and then I said this in the Discord, but it would be interesting for people to know that we always talk about Americans saying soccer, and historically that word actually comes from England. Rugger, which is rugby from the 1800s, and soccer, which is football from the 1800s as well. And then we kind of disbarred that word. But as I say, a lot of people over here, typically you support a minimum of two teams, minimum being your international team, so the country that you're kind of bought in. So for me, I'm born in England, so therefore you generally support England, through thick and thin. Your domestic team, so just mentioning there, Colorado Rapids and stuff, that's the locality of your location. That's typically kind of club football. And I say the minimum is that sometimes people have a third team, and the third team is, it's typically a team that if your team is not in the top division, you follow them because they're really successful. So my local team is called Middlesbrough, we are not in the top division. But in the top division, there's teams like Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City. Some people will gravitate towards those teams because your team isn't in the top division. And it's also the same at the World Cup or internationals. If England get knocked out, well, I'm not going to stop watching the football, so I will follow like a secondary team. So generally speaking, people follow at least two teams.
Okay. I mean, that's sort of, I guess there's similar things like that here. I feel like it's usually you have to be, I don't know, maybe not even a diehard fan. Like, I guess I know people like from where I grew up who would be like really into the high school, like American football team, as well as like they'd have a college team they watch, and then like they watch the NFL or whatever. So I know that's not quite the same thing, but I guess it's not unusual that someone could follow multiple teams in the same sport,
I think it's somewhat similar here. Like, I found going to MLS games, like, MLS is cool. It's not the top football on the planet by any stretch. So you see a lot of people, wearing jerseys from like Manchester, Chelsea, or whatever, like there, because they're also fans of the Premier League teams, and that's like separate from your local American teams. And then for the World Cup, I think something big here in the past decade or so has been the women's World Cup team. So that's almost that's been like a pretty unprecedented successful American soccer team internationally. So I think you also have people who are like big fans of them as well.
Yeah, you said you followed that like when that was like really popping off, right?
Yeah, a little. I didn't watch the last one, but I think the previous one, I watched a lot of the matches. Yeah, the World Cup, I much prefer watching our U.S. women's play than U.S. men's.
Yeah, because that's like, I don't know, that's like the first time I don't know, I guess I don't follow it even remotely closely to know, but that was like one of the only times I've been like aware of like a U.S. soccer team, so I don't know if is that tradition, like is the United States like usually ever competitive in that realm? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a strange one because there's a difference between men's and women's. There's a difference between the Euros and the World Cup, and then there's also a difference with the Olympics as well. So they're pretty confusing. So between men's and women's, the women's US team is one of the best teams in the world, as far as I can tell. I think they're definitely in top 5, but recently in the top kind of 3. The men's US team is getting better because they recently had a German coach, and that German coach put the Germany team on the track to becoming an ultra successful team maybe 10 years ago. So there's that kind of side of it. There's kind of, the men's versus women's progress. But then you've also got the international kind of stage when it comes to the World Cup. The World Cup is every 4 years. Every 2 years in between that, you have the Euros. So the Euros is coming up this year. So 2024, it's all of the European teams. Ironically, England is in that, even though we're not part of the Euros kind of officially anymore. But the idea being is that every 4 years there is a major tournament, and that gets leapfrogged every 2 years. So it's World Cup, Euros, World Cup, Euros. And the World Cup, in terms of at least the final, that gets as many viewers. I think it's the most watched sports event in the entire world. So every 4 years, the next one will be 2026. That will be the next time that you'll see the big progress of the teams. And the reason they do it every 4 years is not only because it feels special, but it means that teams can get significant progress within that time. And even with the name, International Superstar Soccer, the international part is really important because there's no club teams in the game kind of whatsoever. So it's trying to appeal to a broad kind of audience. And then the final one is the Olympics. So you get the dream team in kind of the basketball, and you get, Michael Jordan and stuff. In the Olympics of football, that's not allowed because if you did that, you would get all of the best players in the world. That would basically just be another World Cup. So the restriction that they place on there is you have to be below the age of 23. and you can normally have one over 30s player. So the over 30s player would be extremely experienced, like a David Beckham or something like that. The under 23s players will be the up and comers. So they're not necessarily in the international teams. They're not on the world stage, but they're the next kind of crop of people. But ironically, England don't take part in that. We have a Great Britain team, which is England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. So we have a combination of the kind of the nations.
I can think of that in terms of the different tiers of belts in wrestling. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Intercontinental, exactly.
Yes, exactly, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something fun for the podcast that you'll get to research at some point down the road is when you get to Mia Hamm soccer.
Yes,
for the N64.
I think I purchased that, I think, alongside either this or FIFA 64. I've just been I've got a spreadsheet of like all the games I have, and then I'm trying to, fill out the in-betweens. And at one point I needed I didn't have either game, and I think I found it like sold together with Mia Hamm. So I'm already ready. I got Mia Hamm soccer. I don't know when that comes up, but I think it's much farther down the line.
Yeah.
But this does have me. I'm pretty jazzed now to play more soccer games after playing this compared to. We'll get into it, but yeah, this one really got me fired up. I'm excited to relate your experiences as a soccer fan at whatever level, and your experience as a soccer game fan, like when we get into the games. But first, we should do our flashback segment. So we're flashing back we're moving forward. Our last episode was August 12th. So this game came out in America August 22nd, 1997. We haven't moved very far in the last few episodes, so there's not been as much like new things to talk about. We got a lot of like the same familiar songs in our the top 5 on the charts. I'll Be Missing You, Mo Money, Mo Problems, Quit Playing Games with My Heart, Semi-Charmed Life. I think we've mentioned all those, all well, to varying degrees, bangers. But what else do we got? Two Become One by the Spice Girls is back in the top. I think the Spice Girls, it comes up a lot in our episodes for this year, because I think Spice was the best-selling record of 1997, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Yeah, Jamie, speak on that. Spice is probably a big deal for you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially the kind of the school discos, it was just kind of everywhere at the time. I mean, Britpop was kind of huge in general, so you had things like Oasis and Blur. Oh yeah. But the Spice Girls, you couldn't get away from them. And also, if you follow football, this was around the time where David Beckham started dating Victoria Beckham, who's Posh Spice.
Yes, I love. We watched some of their videos, and it's fun. I don't know, it's fun seeing them. That was equally like, I mean, it was pretty massive here too. Like I feel like there's not a middle school dance I went to that didn't have at least Wannabe playing.
Wannabe, yeah.
It's the massive hit. Number 1 albums. We have pretty much all the same ones I've mentioned before in the number 1 album. They're like the top 5. No Way Out, The Art of War, Men in Black, the album, and Spice. So I was like, I was like mentioning something new each episode. So this week, number 4 on the list of the top albums is Transistor by 311.
They just did a tiny desk.
They did a tiny desk. We watched that.
311.
On 311
March 11th.
I'm into 311 now, I think, after watching that. I was like, they're chill. Yeah. They're cool.
Always wanted to go on their cruise. I feel like
they have a cruise
would be a good time. Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's cool. Paramore does a cruise that I've been wanting to do.
Parahoy, right?
Yeah, Parahoy.
Yeah, that'd be cool. The number 1 movie that week was Copland. Stallone. And we watched that. It was so awesome. I loved it. I'd never seen that before, but man, that was sick.
It's a place where the sheriff wears the badge, but the cops own the town.
My jurisdiction ends at the George Washington Bridge, but half the men I watch live beyond that bridge. When no one's watching, I'm watching. Effective the Sheriff of Copland.
August 13th, South Park aired its first episode. Yeah, I thought about I was like, maybe we should watch the premiere of South Park, and I was like, maybe we're probably fine. But I just out of a curiosity, maybe we still might. We're gonna be talking about South Park on the show multiple times, I guess. We have to. Mm-hmm. So maybe we gotta watch every single episode. No.
For research.
For research purposes, yeah.
Moving out to Colorado a decade ago, it is wild, the influence that South Park actually holds out here.
Really?
Because we went to Casa Bonita once, and they had it was so much South Park stuff in there because it was featured on the show, and then the creators went and bought it and reopened it, etc. But if you go to there's a used bookstore, record store, tabletop gaming store called Black and Red out here, and it's pretty big, it's pretty awesome, and they have a section in their tabletop section that's Trey Parker's favorite tabletop role-playing games and stuff. And
so they love
I don't know,
I can see that they're local heroes, I guess.
Yeah,
they're from Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, we talked about Spice. I should have thought about the local implications of South Park for you.
Yeah, they're basically our Spice Girls. Here, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Basketball is actually the bigger sport out here.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure that we're gonna have to watch that at some point too. That'll be sick.
If I haven't seen it in 20 years, but if I remember correctly, it's pretty fun.
Real Big Fish is in it, so that's cool.
Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You bastard!
Now let's get into our only game this month. McKenna, tell us about International Superstar Soccer 64.
International Superstar Soccer 64 is the first 3D entry in the International Superstar Soccer series, featuring 36 teams and 6 game modes. In single-player training mode, you can master the controls before you get into competitive play. Play a single match by yourself or with up to 3 others in multiplayer, or you can choose CPU versus CPU if you just want to spectate. In the International Cup, you'll play a series of matches to determine a winner, while in the World League, you'll play 70 matches total, with 36 teams participating. Penalty kick shootouts allow you to play a round of penalty kicks on their own, and scenarios throw you into second-half matches based on real-life games, often requiring you to come from behind or keep a team from scoring off of a free kick.
Is it called International Superstar Soccer in the other regions as well? Jamie, is that what you got it is? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the UK especially, but I found this out afterwards that apparently in Japan it's called Jikyo J-League or something, and the precursor, the follow-on to this was Pro Evolution Soccer, and that was called Winning 11. So I think it's always been the English-speaking side of the world, and then the Japanese-speaking side of the world has always had 2 different names.
Oh, okay. So I take it football, soccer games in general, I would imagine you probably played from a young age if you were a big fan. What was I guess even before this, what was the context of what you were into before this game?
Yeah, so I'll tell you one of my favorite kind of anecdotes. I've got several, hopefully for this episode, but so I had a friend that had a PlayStation, and I never played any football games before this point, really. Even though I liked football, there's been several eras through football where it's had top-down. Think of it like a foosball table where you're looking from an aerial kind of view, and then you get into the side-on and kind of the 3D era. So by the time ISS kind of came around, that was in the 3D era. But I was playing Road to World Cup before this. So there's FIFA Road to World Cup, which I think came out in the same year. And I went to my friend's house. We played it on PlayStation. We played it all the time. It's an amazing game. It's got kind of club teams. It's got international teams. It's got the licenses and so on. So I asked for that for Christmas. And at the time, I think I only owned maybe 4 N64 games. And I said, I love this Road to World Cup game. Please get me this. Christmas Day, maybe 97 or 98, whenever it was, there's an N64 game, and kind of wrapping, you can see it in kind of the size. I opened it up and it was the biggest disappointment I'd ever had, which was International Superstar Soccer 64. And I was like, I don't know what this game is. I've literally never heard of it. Because I was hoping for Road to World Cup at the time, which in the pantheon of FIFA games, Road to World Cup is kind of considered right up there. Maybe it's not aged very well. However, within about 6 days, less than a week, my mind was completely changed. And that set the track for all of the football games that I played over the next 15 years. Because what a lot of people won't realize with this game is this is effectively, in the football terms of the Japanese games, this is Demon Souls to what Pro Evo became in Dark Souls. This is the precursor to what was effectively, I said earlier about eras of dominance. This started the 3D kind of era for football games, really. And that domination for Pro Evo, which was the next, the follow-on series, that stayed until kind of 2008. So this is the start of kind of the next decade of dominance for Japanese football games.
Wow, that's so cool. I had no idea. Ryan, we this is great because we've been documenting your month to month experience with the Nintendo 64 in 1997, which I appreciate. Was this one you got right at the time, and were you into soccer games before this?
Yeah, so I would say my interest in soccer games goes back to the NES. I got as a kid, I got World Cup Soccer, which is in that Kunio-kun genre of games. And I obviously at the time didn't know who Kunio-kun was, or how this was a reskin Japanese game or anything, but I loved it. I thought it played so well. My friends and I would play it after school, and then then we discovered Super Dodgeball and River City Ransom, and we're like, that's interesting. All of these characters are exactly the same. Must be a coincidence. Anyways, and then then I dabbled in soccer games on the 16-bit systems. I played would rent a FIFA or something. And then I made, then the 3D era of video game consoles came around, and I made the smartest decision you could at the time and bought a 3DO, and which was
cool.
It had some bangers, but one of the games I got with it was the FIFA on there, and it was really, really good. So that kind of, held my interest. One of my friends got a Saturn right when it came out in 94, and I'm totally blanking on the name of...
Virtua Striker.
Not Virtual Striker. Which is great, but it's called Victory Goal in Japan, and there's an amazing theme song for it. That's very Daytona USA-esque, but and I forgot what the American version of it was called, but we had a ton of fun with that. And then then I remember reading Nintendo Power and stuff, and if you were there at the time, there was a N64 game drought. But my friends and I were still using the N64 mostly as a multiplayer system. And I remember in a magazine like Nintendo Power Game Pro or something, there was an interview with Miyamoto, and they asked him okay, besides Nintendo, who's making the best games for the Nintendo 64? And I remember him saying Konami with J-League Perfect Striker. And he's like, that game is that game is raising the bar for what's possible on the N64 with... I don't remember if he talked about the visuals or the control or the voice samples or anything. I don't remember exactly, but I remember him being like, yeah, that game is, raising the bar for third parties on the N64. And, I took that as gospel. And then when I found out, like, this game was coming to the US like almost a year later, but it would be, 4 players. My friends and I ended up renting it, and we played it a ton, and then I ended up buying it and played it even more, and that was where it was my first exposure to Konami soccer games. And then I would, just like my interest in soccer, I would like dip in and out over the years. But then I would, pick up Winning 11 here and there on like PS2 and stuff. So yeah,
That's
that was
awesome.
kind of my experience with it.
So neither of you had the misfortune of playing the FIFA 64, right?
No.
Okay.
Not until you recorded that episode and I finally played it for the first time.
We couldn't do the same thing like we're doing with this and have a whole episode about it, because I feel like we don't have as much to say about it comparatively. But yeah, how do you feel about this one just in general compared to our experience with FIFA?
Well, it just like works.
Yeah.
Just the controls are much more responsive. Like I press a button and it does the thing that I want it to do when I press the button, instead of like, are you gonna do the thing that I wanted you to do?
Yeah.
It feels so much smoother.
FIFA 64, they seem to brag about how like realistic the animations looked, and I think they like, if you're looking at it, I think some of the character movements maybe look a little bit more realistic, but there is that sort of thing of like, okay, well, this is a video game, like maybe we make some concessions to like make it a little snappier. That right away was the big difference maker. Like right away, it's just like a base level like playing. It's more fun. But so this is like for Konami, it's like not there was a previous international Superstar Soccer on the SNES, which we didn't get a chance to play. I've never played it. Have either of you gotten a chance to play that game?
No. I saw screenshots of it. I know it was on the PlayStation as well. Like, and I didn't own a PlayStation, but at the time, everybody was kind of Mega Drive, Genesis era. It was Sensible Soccer is where a lot of people played.
I love that.
There was. I think they've done some kind of rehashes of it since. It's got variations on kind of the name, and it's very similar to that. Is it Pixel Cup Soccer you've mentioned a few times? That's on Steam. It's kind of the same kind of vibe. But yeah, I never played it. And again, the first time I'd literally heard of this series was when I opened the disappointment of the Christmas present. I'd never heard of it before that point.
Okay, well, yeah, it seems like well, yeah, like even the previous one, like from what I looked up, it seemed like well respected as well. But yeah, this one really was more of a game changer for sure. Like I mentioned it in our FIFA episode, but even like looking at Nintendo Power at the time, they were like, and if this isn't enough soccer for you, we've got another soccer game coming. And it really felt like they were like, just hold out, it'll be okay.
Yeah. I've played the Super Famicom ISS, I guess it's J League, but it actually did get a Western release on Super Nintendo, and if I remember correctly, it's really expensive. But I played it like way after the fact, like probably 10-15 years ago for the first time, and I thought it was fun. It looks and sounds awesome. Like it really it's kind of like one of those like quintessential SNES looking and sounding games.
Okay, yeah.
So I would say it's definitely like worth checking out, playing a couple rounds.
You mentioned that, it makes me think like I think this 64 International Superstar Soccer looks really good too. Like, yeah, it doesn't like I feel like the animations aren't like as lifelike or whatever, but like just the overall like when I was young, I don't think this is the game. I think it was a PlayStation game that my friend's older brother had, that it was a soccer game, and this really like kind of matched like the vibes of it that I had in my head as a kid of like I don't know, there's something about it, like I didn't know much about soccer, and it just had this cool, I don't know, like cool vibe to it. And this really, like, it looks good, it plays good, and the music also is really great too.
Yep.
So just beyond like, yeah, it plays better, I just noticed too when we like turned on the game and everything, the presentation was overall just like, oh, this is nice. This is a very classy product.
Yeah, the N64 sound font is like on full display with this game. It is wonderful. I really like the presentation of this. And just so I don't lose my Sega fan credentials, I looked up the game I was talking about earlier on Saturn.
Okay, good.
Sega International Victory Goal Worldwide Soccer. I don't know why I could not remember Worldwide Soccer, but that's what it was
There's a
called.
lot of words in the title.
Yeah, and it has Victory Goal.
syllables.
Like, I could remember the Japanese name, like, just full weeb issues here. My broken brain.
That does remind me of, like, we were watching a video of, like, every soccer game, you know, or every football game or whatever, and it was like clip after clip, like chronologically, and some of them did come up and would have like the most I thought bizarre name, and that was like half the fun, was like, you know, what is, I guess maybe I'm like don't have the context, you know, so I was like, maybe that's something like soccer related I don't understand. But you mentioned I think the multiplayer is definitely really a big feature of this. Like, we played ton of co-op together, which was a lot of fun. Any game that has co-op, even if it's bad, in this case it's not, but even like bad co-op we'll always have fun with. But I was looking at the different options, and like you were saying it before, like every mode basically has, you can do co-op or against each other, or you can even have the computers you can spectate, you can just
throw on a match if you want.
We did that before. We simulated England versus Brazil.
Brazil won.
That was Brazil won 4-0. Yeah.
Brazil is OP in this game.
Yeah.
That was the match we struggled with in our, what is it, World League? Or is that what we were doing?
World League, I think it was. Yeah, we got to a point where we were doing pretty good on like the second highest difficulty, so like easy, but then we came up against Brazil and they just shut us down.
Funny thing, because I remember when you Gu and McKenna, when you were first starting to play ISS, and you're like posting on Blue Sky, like, this game is hard as hell, how do you win a match? I remember that and being like, I don't remember it being like that hard. And so for this episode, I have copies of the Japanese J-League game, and then also the PS1 version of this. So I was playing those, and I was playing ISS. And what's interesting is in the J-League games, the default difficulty is 2. It's, and then in ISS, the default difficulty is 3. And so there is like, it's kind of still that era of like, like Western games are harder by default because they don't want people renting them, etc. But obviously you can just like go in and drop the difficulty down. But I found the gap between difficulty 2 and 3 is massive. Like, it is like a grueling game on 3, unless you're playing like your Brazil versus like Denmark or something, like teams with like wildly different stats. But even it seems like sometimes like the stats don't make as much of a difference as the actual difficulty level.
I don't know if this is true, but I felt like the like status of the players really made a big difference. And that's something I didn't understand at first, but I came to really like about it was once we found a good difficulty level and we were playing through like whatever the World League mode, there would be some where I'd see like, oh, our players aren't doing so good, but theirs are good. And it was a struggle. And there was even some, like we lost that game to Brazil, and it was way less frustrating than when we were getting into it. And I didn't understand like, oh, there's like a way, like we can overcome this. And I kind of started to really appreciate the difficulty. Like, oh, it compared to like something like some of the more arcade games we've played where there are stats and it can be difficult, but overall like the games are pretty much the same. This with like the player status and the stats and the difficulty level, it made it a lot more like unpredictable. Certain players would have better games than others, you know, and I kind of really got into that where I started to like get hooked by that because I was like, you know, we wouldn't do as well a certain game and I'd be like, okay, well there's always the next game and like what player can we sort in and improve. And I don't know, I found that actually like the difficulty is almost like it became like a strength of the game for me that gave it more replay value. Jamie, you were gonna add on earlier. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, just on the Brazil thing, and it's funny you mentioned about all the difficulty stuff. Is generally a good way to tell if you've got good AI in the game is, aside from the difficulty slide as you mentioned earlier, is if the game can replicate the real life style of a given team. And Brazil and Germany, historically on the international stage, they are the two best teams in the world. Germany is ultra reliable. They can go into a tournament, or running up to the tournament, they can have some really poor results, but guaranteed that they will get to the semi-final every single time, you know, pretty much. Even the new Euros that's coming up this year, Germany is not very good, but Germany will probably get to the semi-finals kind of regardless. So there's that reliability. And then the thing you mentioned about Brazil is, Brazil pretty much plays with 11 attackers. I mean, that's what they do. They just run forward, score as many goals as possible. They don't care if they get conceded, 3 goals against, as long as they score 4. So there's different philosophies. And it's the same for Italy. And Italy's the classic one where historically, I forget the name of it, but they're a very defensive kind of style. So sometimes you might come across Italy in these kind of football games, and it's the same in ISS. And you might win 3-0 against Denmark, like you've just mentioned there. You come across Italy and you find it difficult even to get one shot off. And if you do get the shot off, you got to hope that your striker is having a good game. And the thing where it ties in with the form is some strikers in the game will score a goal kind of regardless of their form. And then you will really gravitate towards that player because rain or shine, this guy's going to score. But sometimes, the star player on the team will miss because he's got the unhappy kind of smiley face. And I'm pretty sure that stuff's random, but not many modern football games kind of go that route because, especially in a PvP kind of sense. But there's a lot of opportunity to do that in something like a World League mode where you have 5 games and you score in a good run. And then you have a couple of games where you're kind of off the boil, and then you have to take that player out the team and stuff. But I think in this case, I'm pretty sure it's just random.
It did seem random, but I felt like it, like I could sort of tell, like that was probably one of the most advanced like forms of that. Like I'd never see. I guess I haven't played a lot of sports games, but at that, like when I think of stuff from that time, and especially compared, I guess we've done more arcade, but I haven't seen that level of like depth of strategy, And this game has it all over. Like it has the different formations. You can kind of assign different. We never got into really assigning the roles. I feel like they kind of automatically did that. And then like the strategies we didn't really get into, but that seems like something when you get to a higher level of play, like probably comes in more, I assume. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Did you find like yourself doing plays or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in football games, people are looking for the cheese, the formation where you just play, 8 strikers and 2 defenders or something like that. But I think typically, in terms of like the authenticity of the game, each team and each nation also has the classic formation that they have. So England is the classic kind of 4-4-2. It's very rigid kind of structure, especially in the 90s, around this time comes up. But you might find that your strikers are too isolated. So what you might want to do is you might want to push one of your midfielders slightly further forward, or in defense, you're really getting overwhelmed by Brazil. Therefore, you want to push one of the midfielders slightly backwards, so you've got more of a kind of a holding midfielder to kind of soak up that pressure. But I don't know how much of a difference it makes on the highest difficulty, especially when you're against somebody like Brazil, because I would suspect that it's more about how quickly you move the ball and how quickly you pass between players. I think that would have a bigger factor than the formations themselves, but it does differ game to game. You know, on this game it might be because it's less advanced than modern football games. But modern kind of stuff, you know, the formation is the difference between winning or losing, even before you kick off, you know, from the start of the match.
For sure. In moving the ball around, the game does give you a lot of, like, options. It was a bit, I think, it was kind of hard for us to grasp at first. Like, the controls are, like, they can be as, like, arcade simple as something like, you know, Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey on the easy mode. But then when we were trying to figure out, there's a lot of, like, nuanced controls. Like, what did we pick up on
there's,
that?
like, you were doing the through pass a lot.
The through pass. Yeah. It's hard to
and
set
the
up
one where
sometimes.
you pass it to another player, but then they just immediately pass it back to you.
Oh, the 1-1-2. I started to get that, like, the last time we played, like, how to, like, set that up to be advantageous, but it, you know, still not quite sure about it. What headers?
Yeah, we were using that C left a lot.
C left.
For headers and slide tackles.
You were a slide tackling monster.
When we first started, I was slide tackling a lot.
Fouling everybody. I'd be like, oh god, here we go again.
Yeah, I got
just
a couple
hoping
red cards.
You were so aggressive, out there. What's what were some of the things like we haven't? There's some things we haven't fully grasped yet too. Like the doing like a curve on your. Some of the shooting is still like. There's a lot of nuance, it seems, in how you can shoot the ball. We didn't quite get that. Like, so if you have a free kick where you want to try to like get past the guys to score a goal, we didn't do that often. We'd usually try to pass it to someone and have them knock it in or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we struggled with at first too. I feel like this is a somewhat negative factor to the multiplayer. If you're on the same team as sometimes it's hard to know, or like it switches your player for you, and sometimes it'll switch who you're playing to who the other person was controlling, and it's I think it kind of is one of those things where it's trying to set you up for what it thinks is best, but like literally sometimes I'd be controlling a player and then all of a sudden McKenna is controlling the player through no button press or anything. The game is just like, you're playing. But we got used to that a little bit, and it's in the single player I was not like, I kind of appreciated actually when it would auto change, but it definitely gave us a lot of grief.
Yeah, I think it was mostly like you'd think you were passing it to me, but then that player,
you would be controlling the player.
You'd become that player.
Yes, you would become the player you're passing it to, even if the other human player was controlling it, and that would be like, oh shoot, and then you've like, now I'm controlling it, and so that in harder games that would sometimes be a hindrance, because by the time I realize it, Brazil has stolen the ball and moved it down the field, and you're like, oh crap. But I often found that the best, regardless of who I was playing as, the best strategy would be to, like, if they've got the ball, just go the direction of your goal that you're defending, and you'll usually realize which player you're playing as by the time you're ready to try and steal the ball or block it or whatever. So I got, with a lot of things, just got more comfortable with the game and some of its inner workings. But I think I wanted to mention one more thing about the multiplayer. Like, it seemed like you could have a lot of different types of setups, and I think that gives it a lot of replay value, or like can make it suit your play style. Because I feel like we prefer to do co-op for a lot of things, but it looked like you could do up to 4 players co-op against the computer, which I think is awesome, that you could just like all be sitting there playing on the same team. I feel like that would be chaotic. and like maybe not that fun, but maybe it would be to play. We didn't play like any like versus really, but I think that would be fun to have like your massive squad rolling up against the computer.
Yeah.
Just a ton of modes too. What was your favorite mode to play? Like we played.
The scenarios were pretty fun.
The scenarios. That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of getting thrown into a match and either, the other team has the usually it's on like a free kick or a corner kick.
that's one where it would be like
a limited amount of time to like come from behind, or sometimes it would be like, okay, we have like
we have to do it perfectly,
like a minute left and we need to score 2 goals.
Yeah, in any one of those, that was another one where like not being able to do like good curveballs or whatever was a hindrance, because they'd be like, it even say in the description like, make this free kick to help win, and that was not how we would win the scenario. We would always miss it and then just like quickly try to like sneak in some goals in the little bit of time. Are the scenarios, is that a common feature in games? I thought that was really cool. Like it really, I don't know, made the game somewhat educational, I felt like, too.
It's funny you mention it, because it's not a common kind of feature, but also because you mentioned that the game was released in 97. That's actually a big factor, is that Euro 96 was the year before. And actually even the Japan release of this game came out in December. So it was still 6 months after the tournament had kind of finished at this particular point. So therefore, most of the scenarios are at least, I think, based on Euro 96. And I think it was USA 94 before that, which was the World Cup. So at least one of those 2 tournaments will be kind of reflected. But modern football games tend to reflect, the times, like what happened in the Champions League today, or this weekend, Liverpool are going to play Manchester United. Why don't you try and simulate what you think the result is going to be, a bit like your kind of simulation with the AI. But it's interesting because even in modern times, there has been some crazy results in the Champions League that FIFA just does not even give you the opportunity to do whatsoever. So there's a game where Man United are 89 minutes, they are 1-0 behind, and they have basically 3 minutes, 1 minute plus 2 minutes of added time to win the result. And that's exactly what they did in real life. They scored 2 goals in 3 minutes. And I'm really surprised that kind of modern games don't pick that stuff up, because this is a feature that is close to 25 years old, or more than 25 years old at this point. It hasn't been really replicated since. I think there's a mobile game that does it, but none of the kind of contemporary, big football games.
It seems like that could be an endless like stream of like content, I guess you could do, Well, even this weekend, there was a 3-0 result in the UK. Half-time, there was a team that was 3-0 up. So 3-0 in football terms means you've lost the game, pretty much. 3-0 half-time, this team comes back and they score 4 goals and they win 4-3, which is considered a huge upset. And it's the first time it's happened in 15 years or something. And that's a perfect opportunity that they could have used. Club football or international football, but most of the scenarios that you'll have played will be based off real things that happened around Euro 96. It was a bit, it wasn't that difficult, but like looking up some of them, like the game, I guess that's a thing with the game, is like it doesn't have the licenses like FIFA does. But from what I understood, it was like fairly accurate with like the players and the teams. Like, I don't know how to verify that, but that's what the impression I got from reading reviews and stuff was. I think I read somewhere, someone was like, you could go in and change all the players' names to the real players' names, and like it would line up with like the real player. So I think that's cool, at least, that they tried to capture it as realistic as they could.
Yeah, I mean, they push it further in kind of the following games, because it kind of spawned off its own kind of subculture of kind of editing the game and so on. But this is one of my other anecdotes just related to the editing, is that when I got this game, I think it was the first game I owned that I didn't have a memory pack. So when I discovered what the team was, the real players, because there is videos on YouTube even right now that tell you what the real teams were. The kits are fairly authentic; they're not fully licensed, but the players themselves are kind of lookalikes. So before I would play the game, every single time I would edit the entire England team.
No.
I would set that it would take me like 20 minutes every single time because you can only change the text, thankfully. And then I would play the game for several hours at a time. I would switch off the console and I would come back to the game and I would have none of that data was saved. So this was the game that actually pushed me to buy a memory pack as well.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, we've talked about the memory pack of like I think a lot of people have gone through that, like this discovery of like, what the hell, I have to buy this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, did you do custom teams or anything like that?
No, I think like, it does remind me though of the wrestling games on N64, which, I was into this game, but like my friends and I were like even more into like those WCW and WWF games, and there was a lot of like customizing, making creative characters and stuff. So I do feel like the N64 was, I don't know if it was like the start of like vast like mainstream customization of games on consoles, but it's one that I really associate the console with a lot of like create a player and stuff like that.
Big time. We got into it a little bit. We first made ourselves. I will say I think this has a better like it's very limited, obviously, but it's better I think overall than like NBA Hang Time. Like there's a little bit more to choose from, and like the fact that you can kind of it's a game with more players, but like that you can kind of like make custom teams. That's essentially what we did. We made a team that was us and everyone who's ever been on the show. Yeah. I think I had to like combine some people as units, but you both were on our team. I wish I remembered what players you were, but I assure you had great stats, and everyone had great stats, and we're star players. And you just have to, you can't like make a team, you just have to like replace a team. So I replaced everyone. I picked Ireland just because I was like, what's a cool, we're recording on St. Patrick's Day actually.
St. Patrick's, yeah.
Coincidentally, but I was like, I think I was like, what's the coolest country? And I just thought Ireland is the coolest country. I don't know what I'm basing it off of, just vibes, I guess. But so we were Ireland, and we like owned for the most part, other than Brazil kicked our ass, and we had like a couple draws. But I want to thank all our guests for. I didn't understand some of the stats, but I would just be like, this person's like a goalie, so I'm gonna defense is 100 or 99 or whatever, and then like give them, they give you a lot of points to allocate, so you can make a really good team, which I guess is fair. I guess if you're in there like making yourself, you want to be like awesome, right? Yeah. I guess that's one thing NBA Hang Time has over this is it makes you work for your points you get in
you have to like level up, like
you have to win, which we could not do. I think it works better if you're playing more against your friends, and you're probably beating your friends. But I don't want to get into NBA Hang Time again, but we had a hard time. Like the difficulty on that was rough.
The slingshot.
Effect, yeah. So the scenarios were cool. We did watch some of them, and Jamie, you shared some, so thank you for that.
Yeah, it's cool. Especially the ones I sent you were, at least from an English perspective, they were the two that I recognized. But there were other countries, but I would have to, much like you did, probably just research them myself as to what result that probably referred to.
McKenna, you found some more. I think they were all from.
Yeah, everything. Time. Yeah. What I was looking at, the scores matched up like the Euro 96 games.
Yep.
The team matchups.
I think all of them too give you a chance. It's like almost like alternate history a little bit, right? Like where they put you on the side of the losing team and you get to like reverse it, which is like way more fun than just like, beat this team or whatever. Like, it makes you feel like, I don't know. There was a couple we did where we had to play them like 4 times, and it really gave it the sense of like, okay, we can do this. We can do this. We just have to like get it perfect. And we did some. We had to do way more because couldn't make those goals. But
yeah, I think the one where we had to score
5 goals. I think
5,
that's
yeah.
the where it's they're 4 up on you, and you. Yeah.
Oh, one Holland. Yeah, I think it's like the 5 stars. Yeah, but it reminds me, just as you mentioned that, the way you can tell about the tournaments is if it's the Euros, then obviously it's the European teams. So if you ever see a result that has America, Brazil, Argentina, that won't have been from the Euros. That's probably from '94, the US kind of World Cup or some kind of friendly. But the other one is the only other game I've kind of come across that had this similar feature. There's an F1 game, which you might cover on the podcast at some point. I think it's F1 Grand Prix or something. They do something similar, which is
I think I bought that recently.
Yeah, if you play that, that's got one where it's kind of like you're in the rain, you're at the front of the race, your wheel comes off, and you've got 3 laps in the rain to kind of finish the race and try and stay in the lead. You know, they'll do crazy stuff like that.
That's cool. That gets me hyped for that. Well, you mentioned, the rain.
Yeah,
that's one thing.
I was just thinking about.
That
makes such a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if the FIFA really, they did, like, I don't think they had a couple different, like, this has different stadiums, different weather conditions. It really does change the feel of some of the matches and some of the settings, you know.
The passing, it really affected the passing, I think. Just, like, trying to receive the ball.
Yeah, that did. Yeah, that kind of blew me away. Like, there was definitely in many aspects of this game, it was more subtle than I guess I expected compared to the other games we've even covered for this show. Kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the features, like all those modes, we haven't even mentioned them all. There's like we didn't do too much of it, but like the penalty kick mode where you kind of that's like its own little mini game. That was kind of fun. I could see. I don't know. Did you guys do a lot of that? Ryan, did you do much of the penalty kick mode? Get into that?
No, because I always feel like penalty kicks are really hard. And nope. Just played regular games mostly.
I could see, yeah, we tried it out like once. I was like, this is cool, this is here, but it's not really, what I'm coming here for.
It's really nice for
stressful, yeah.
For, figuring out how to do it before you have to do it, in
True.
an actual game. Because it happened to us in a game, and we were like, how does this work?
Yeah. and you mentioned, like, that makes me think of, too, like, the training mode in this is really good. Like, it just gives you, it's nice to have an opportunity to, like, because like I said, reading the manual, some of it, like I'd say it's like written fairly well, but sometimes I'm like, I would like it explained in like what's more essential, what are the things I should like first try to be doing. And so I think I had to like look further at like, actually I think I pulled up a game FAQ from 1997 again and see like what they said about shooting and passing. And then I went in and tried that in the practice mode, and that, I don't know, that helped a lot. And then, like I said, I think I just slowly, there's a lot of, like, I don't know, it really was, like, clicking for me in that, like, I sort of, like I said, any sport I feel like I could go watch and have fun, but I felt like I really started to, like, get even more so, like, the appeal of soccer, like as a sport, like some of the strategies or like even just as this video game. Cause I don't know. How did you feel, McKenna, like in terms of like the real life element, like I felt like I could start to see like some of the strategies and like what are cool things to look out for in soccer and like cool plays and things like that.
Yeah. I found myself playing like similarly to how I would play a real soccer game, where anytime I got the ball, I would just take it up the side and then try and get it towards the middle of the field to someone open who could score.
Yeah,
and that was like that
setting
was
someone
like,
else up.
Yeah. And then like corner kicks, those which are big, goal scoring opportunities.
That's how we scored most of our points. Yeah,
we scored a lot. Yeah, corner kicks kind of can get a little chaotic, because you have so many players just bunched up. So we just kick it up and then button mash.
Anytime one was coming up, we would where we'd see the words corner kick on the screen, we'd both look at each other and be like, all right, here we go. And then one of us would just pass it, and we're just both mashing the shoot button. And I think I had a video of some, but where the ball, sometimes it would be absurd, the way it goes, where I'm like, this would never even, I guess there are probably some very strange goals in real life, but some of these I was only in a video game could this happen. Or ping pong's crazy.
Yeah, it happens, and I've seen it happen.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes back to the thing I said earlier about the different teams and the play styles. I mean, this is in an earlier time where the AI is fairly simplistic, but you can still do a lot in the game. Even when you look at the manual, having a dedicated button for a lofted through pass and then kind of a modifier kind of input, that's something that carried on to the franchise, maybe 10, 15 years later. The stuff that's in FIFA today that has a hidden control, this is in FIFA, you can double tap the shoot button and it will keep the ball on the ground. And the game doesn't explain that to you whatsoever. But that comes from something that was in ISS, really, really early on in ISS. And it's a secret control that you can't find anywhere in the game, but you have to go back to an N64 manual. And anybody that's played football games for kind of 20 years, you would just know that stuff, but the game wouldn't necessarily tell you. But even with the corner kick stuff, in real life, teams only score corner kicks less than 10% of the time. So most of the time they'll just pass it. So there can be some unrealistic stuff. But then different teams will do different things. Some teams will just ping pong pass it through the middle. Some teams will just run down the line because they've got a 7-foot striker and they just want to launch it at that striker's kind of head. And the other thing in real football is the time when the ball is off the ground, you automatically level the playing field. So if you play on the grass, on the ground, it's much more technical, it's much more skillful. If you take the ball off the ground, it becomes much more luck-based. So that's one of the ways how a low-tier team can compete with a high-tier team, is as soon as you take the ball off the ground, you eliminate their kind of strengths. So there's different things like that as well.
I noticed that we were able to turn over, to our possession a lot of, airborne plays, even against the harder teams, for sure. That sort of element you just said, where the teams have different strategy, that's another way. Again, compared to my favorite game we've played so far that's a sports game is Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey, but I guess that's more arcade, obviously, but it doesn't feel as far as I can tell, the AIs and that don't really have different strategies, you know what I mean? Playing one team, it's just their stats, and this is when I was actually and I was able to notice this team is more aggressive in this way, or this team fields the ball this way, and I don't know. I never quite figured out, who does what, but in the moment I was noticing that, and this is one of those games we mentioned in our last episode with Tetrasphere, of a game I hadn't really played much before, where now I can see I don't feel done with this game. I feel we'll go on. I'll probably we still have our I forgot the name of the mode again, but the sort of season mode, I still have that going. So I'll probably continue that and hopefully try to stay in the top spot. That's one thing I love, is we're actually fluctuating, from 5th to 3rd to 1st and stuff. And so that's just one that's I feel I have this impulse that I'm I got to go back and try to improve our ranking and win,
And you will get a chance to come back to this game in a couple of years, or maybe 7 or 8 years in your podcast timeline, because they did release another one on N64. I think 98. Maybe
there's 2. I think 98 and 2000.
Oh, in 2000, yeah, which I think is also really rare, if I remember correctly. But yeah.
So is that, I mean, I guess you said like this becomes sort of like the standard for that era, and so it's like maybe as a teaser for those episodes, like do those games they have like the same? Is it like, I feel like all those N64 wrestling games, for example, like those are all considered like great for the most part, like to varying degrees, like the NWO and the No Mercy or whatever. Like, are all these ISS games also like, oh, these are like the powerhouse soccer games of the era, or do they kind of falter, or what's Konami's deal, I guess, with this?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine with all franchises, there's kind of some missteps, but by the time you get to the PS2, especially when it becomes Pro Evo, so Pro Evolution Soccer is effectively the same franchise, but, you know, further down the line, by the time it gets to that point, that's the point where people definitely agree that Pro Evolution Soccer is better than FIFA. We should also mention at this point that, you know, the two best football games of this kind of era, neither of them is made in England, which is where football's been created. So one of them is from Japan, which is the ISS franchise. The other one is in Canada, which is, you know, the FIFA franchise. Neither of which on the international stage are particularly fantastic kind of teams, but the development teams are making great games. And I think the big difference with ISS 98 is they have two licensed players on the front cover. One is Paul Ince, the other one is Fabrizio Ravanelli. Ince is from England, Ravanelli is from Italy. They're both players that played for my hometown team, which is just by coincidence more than anything else. But I imagine that says a lot about what that game did. Is I imagine that the England team and the Italian team at the very least are licensed at that point, because you can see on the cover they've got fully licensed kind of kits. But historically, the only real thing that changes with the franchise is FIFA starts to get more of the licensing, and, you know, ISS, which becomes Pro Evo, improves upon the gameplay, so a lot of people stay for the gameplay.
Okay, is that still? I feel like now I only ever hear about FIFA, but I'm kind of an outsider to it. I feel like they've kind of just it's sort of like, I don't know, Madden or whatever, where it's like that's synonymous with the game.
Yeah, so I said earlier, you go through the eras. You kind of get the top-down era, you get the side-scrolling, you get the 3D. ISS is kind of the start of Pro Evo's kind of dominance. So everybody calls it Pro Evo because that's what ISS kind of became. These days, I think it's called eFootball, but a lot of people will still call it Pro Evolution Soccer. But 2008 is kind of the tipping point where they had a really bad Pro Evolution Soccer or ISS game, and they had a really good FIFA. And FIFA's been on the ascendancy ever since. And it was the crossroads. Also, that was the time when we went from PS2 to PS3, so it's kind of the transition to the HD era. And then now, you know, as in modern day, it is FIFA that's completely dominant, but the only difference there is that everybody still calls it FIFA, but it doesn't have the FIFA license anymore because it's called EA Sports kind of FC, but it's the same thing. I call ISS Pro Evo, even though that's not the name of it.
Sure.
People will call EA Sports FC FIFA because that's what they've known it being for the past 15 years. But now it's basically a monopoly. You know, there is the other stuff we mentioned earlier, Pixel Cup Soccer and some revivals. But in the main line, you either play FIFA or you don't play football games. That's pretty much your choice.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer because that's something I really like. Like some of the games we were watching, just that compilation of footage of different games, and I loved, like, there were some that looked horrible, but then there were some that looked cool and unique, like Ryan, you mentioned Virtua Striker. Like, I've never really played that, but I was like, oh, that has like a cool like look to it. Or there was that one that's like a visual novel,
so like RPG.
Do you guys know that one? It's like
Inazuma 11. Is that more recent?
Oh no,
Captain Tsubasa is the manga one.
Yes.
That's what that's the one. What else? I mean, we were playing some soccer on the NES. And I sort of liked like the different interpretations, the different variety of gameplay. And I don't know, now it seems like it is just like it has just kind of fit into, and I'm just not like as big of like a straight up like sports game fan, you know what I mean? So I feel like it doesn't like excite me really to see like whatever the EA thing is. Do you still play it, Jamie?
I have, but I've kind of weaned myself off it, slowly but surely. And kind of PS4, I went from kind of FIFA 14, FIFA 13, maybe playing 300 hours in a year, so roughly about an hour a day, to the modern kind of FIFAs. I'm down to like less than maybe 15 hours, 10 or 15 hours, partially because there's so much choice kind of out there, but partially because they put a lot of time and effort into the PvP modes. And just to bring it to ISS, it's cool to have the co-op modes and all the variations that you mentioned, but it's you versus the AI. And I never really played the game in multiplayer, and you can get a pretty substantial experience out of it. That's not the case with the modern kind of FIFAs. In the modern FIFAs, unless you're playing against other players, then it's super cool. It's very competitive, but it's super cool. If you're just wanting to play with a friend against the AI, it's quite limited in a package. That's not the area of the game that's kind of growing, so they don't kind of support it as much.
Yeah, and like I like having things like that's something that draws me in, like scenarios where it's like, give me a little thing like with even like not like a sort of a story, or like just like here's a thing to beat, and I'm into that. Like, oh, let's go and try to beat this challenge. Whereas like I'm not the type of gamer who's like, all right, let's do a match, unless it's against a friend or something. Ryan, have you kept up? Like, do you play many soccer games or anything?
No. I kind of exited after like winning 11 on PS2 was kind of the end of the era for me, because I think it's it's exactly what Jamie was saying. Like, it's well documented the struggles that the Japanese game industry had in the transition to the HD era, and also with so many Western game developers being based, like having experience in like PC gaming, like very scalable gaming, going up to like they were already making high resolution assets and all of that, whereas like there wasn't really a PC scene in Japan during that time. It was so console and handheld based that there was that like well documented struggle. And so the Japanese sports games kind of fell off in general. And I think another place that we see this is in racing games over the year. Like, there was a time like on PS2 there were so many like soccer games, for example. There are so many different developers making them, besides even like Pro Evo and FIFA. Like, and there were like arcade style games like Sega Soccer Slam and Virtual Striker, and all of these like different like mid-tier like double A type games. And it's the same thing for racing games. There used to be so many people making racing games on like PS1, PS2, and 64 and Saturn. And then now basically like what do we have? We have like Gran Turismo and Forza, and they're like basically just like esports games, which is kind of what I think most sports games have become. Like, it's there's your like ultimate team kind of like gotcha microtransaction kind of thing going on, and then you have like your like competitive esports thing, and it's all very realistic, very sim-like, and outside of like the indies space there's not. And I guess like maybe like Mario Strikers is like the only like kind of big, and that's like Mario Strikers is more hockey than soccer. Honestly, but like the market has just been so narrowed to this like singular idea of like what these kind of games can be. And it's like it's kind of sad, because I think a lot of like Jamie, like you were saying, like a lot of players like us who are adults, casual players who play like multiple different kinds of video games and don't just like invest in like one game a year. Like, it's really like the games just don't feel like made for us anymore.
Yeah, here we are, a bunch of people on a Nintendo 64 podcast being like, things aren't like they used to be.
Except in the indie space, I will say, like,
well,
and that's with like most things. Like, there's cool like indie arcade racing games, and it's just on like that AAA like blockbuster level. Like, it's very narrow now.
I do think with those type of games that are very popular, like I see the appeal to them, and I see why they're cool and stuff like that, like, and why people follow them and get into them and stuff like that. But it is like, it's more like what you were just saying, like, it doesn't necessarily suit my gaming needs, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I appreciate it, but I would like if there was more variety in that. But you also set it up well, like, yeah, the indie soccer game that you showed me and we played, like that. Yeah. That could be something I could get into, because it has like a story mode. You know, you make a character and play through a story, and like there's sort of a finality to it, I guess. You know, it's not. Yeah. Any closing statements on International Superstar, Ryan? Yes.
Yes, something we did not talk about. I was wondering when it would come up naturally, but it hasn't. The replay mode in this after scoring a goal.
Yes.
I remember vividly. I think this was the first game that I had kind of seen that in. Yeah. And it is like, I'm still like extremely impressed by it. Like, you can like zoom the camera around, you can like rewind, fast forward, get to like the perfect thing. Like, I was capturing footage, because when this episode goes up, I'm gonna like post some things, some little bit of brand synergy here.
I think I see it in your N64, right? Is that the cartridge that's in there?
Yes.
I recognize the thick font.
Yeah, so I was playing it and I was like, man, this is like basically like a modern photo mode. Like, you can just like zoom the camera on to get like a perfect shot, and you can get like a perfect screenshot in that replay. But it's pretty wild tech, and I'm sure that, I think maybe even like the FIFA and 3DO might have had this in some capacity, but like, this is just, I don't know, it's so like fast, and like it just works.
Yeah.
Here,
I almost took it for
really
granted.
Cool feature.
But yeah, thinking about it that way, like, I can't think of another game that has that. I think we have some American football games coming up, and one of them I remember playing, and I think I recall having that feature. But yeah, I feel like, now that I think about it, like, yeah, you don't really have that. And that was nice, because we would, like I said, we would make some of these impossible goals, or like some of these silly, like, you know, some people getting own goals or whatever, and you want to go back and see, like, how did that ball bounce in that way? That was a great feature. Jamie, how about you? Anything else you wanted to say? I know you said you had a lot of anecdotes, so I want to make sure we got them all out there into the world, you know?
No, that's cool. A quick anecdote just related to the replay mode before I touch upon something to do with the different regions of the game. So this game really kind of set the foundation for a lot of stuff that came next. And a quick anecdote: this is about Pro Evo 4, which was about 5 iterations kind of forward. They had a replay mode that if you paused the game at the exact moment that the ball crossed the line, it would count as a goal in the replay mode. So you could rewind, cross the ball back over the line, rewind, cross the ball, and you could get your score to 99, which is pretty cool. But obviously that starts with kind of ISS. Awesome. Yeah. Two quick things I was just going to mention about different regions. So as well as having the different names, I didn't actually know this until I looked earlier, but apparently the European version and the US version has a bunch of different teams than what the standard version normally includes, and is also different to the Japanese version. So US and Europe includes Belgium, which are a really good team, Austria and Greece, which are not that great, neither is Poland, but it includes all of what we would consider the home nations over here. So Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Scotland. In the Japanese version, none of those exist. So it's just England, which is pretty funny, especially when you watch Ted Lasso And Ted Lasso is kind of like, how many countries are there in England? You know, it's that kind of thing. It's like 4 countries. But the Japanese version includes, strangely enough, includes Canada and Australia. And at the time, Australia's always been a fairly decent team. So if you play in the European version, there is no kind of Australian contingent.
Oh.
But also, it's a bit strange because when the Euros is on in real life, each continent has their own tournament. So the Euros is for Europe. There's the Asia Oceania tournament. There's an African Cup of Nations and so on. So basically what they're saying is if you get the UK version of the game and the US version, you get Japan and South Korea. And that's pretty much about it, you know, from that area of the game. But the second anecdote is that there is a modded version of this game, which I didn't know about either. And it's called the Mundial Ronaldinho 64.
Yeah, maybe you can explain this.
Yeah, and it's like a modded version. Apparently it came out in 98. It's a bootleg version of the game. So somehow he's managed to hack a cartridge and you can get a hold of it. And I think it just modifies some of the names and maybe some of the gameplay features. I've not actually played it myself. But apparently, you know, just reading some articles, it says that for whatever reason, just before the pandemic, it blew up in terms of like internet memes, and that's what it's most known for. But I never played it. I never even heard of it at the time.
I felt extremely like out of touch because like we started talking. We usually talk about like games we bought or we're playing, and people started sharing memes of that to us, and I'm like, what? I don't know what the hell this is at all. Like, why is this? I've never heard of this meme. I felt out of touch for sure. And there's like a weird story with that, right? Where it's like the name of the game is named after someone else, but it's like licensing. I don't understand the story. Do you remember that?
Are you? I think it's like the Ronaldinho. It's not like the Ronaldinho, like the famous. It's like another guy who was who had that nickname.
Ronaldo's on the cover, so he is super famous. And the other thing I said earlier about, because the game came out in 97, this was before World Cup 98. World Cup 98 includes Brazil, and it's a Brazilian striker, which is Ronaldo. That's on the cover. So this was done at least 6 months later. But they changed his name because Ronaldo is a really famous name. Obviously, in modern era, Ronaldo means something else because there's a different player. But they called him Ronaldinho, which is Little Ronaldo. To add a bit more confusion, 3 years down the line, a real life player comes along who's also called Ronaldinho. But for whatever reason, this is just a bootleg version of the game that is, you know, after the World Cup as opposed to before the World Cup, which is when ISS 64 takes place.
Well, I love that. I love a bootleg game from 1998. It was. I respect that. That's pretty cool. We had a blast playing it. This is definitely I think this is going to take for us like probably the top spot in terms of a sports game that we played. And I don't know. It's like it far surpasses. I guess it's like hard to compare like arcade. This has it all. It can be, you can treat it as an arcade style game, and then I think you can really get into the sim aspect, and there's like, I don't know, like there's a reason to keep going back to it and playing it. And I don't know, I'm into soccer now. but I probably won't be in like 4 months. I'll probably be into, I don't know. Oh, we have a dual pack of NFL games that came out the same day, or like one's American football, one's actually licensed by the NFL. And so then I'll be into football then. We'll just, I change with the wins, you know what I mean?
The quarterback club effect.
Yes, quarterback club. Yeah, it's gonna happen. So,
one more thing I do want to add about this game. So like thinking back to that unsourced Miyamoto quote that I had earlier that I'm pulling from my brain from like 20 years ago.
That's true.
May or may not actually exist, but
I feel like the spirit of it is real though. Like you tell me, I believe it. Yeah,
and so I was like thinking about it. Like, why would he be so impressed, hypothetically, by this game? And I think just as we've been talking, I think like Jamie has brought up some of like the like more deep parts of the game, and how like if you're like really thinking about like formations and teams and play styles and stuff, like you can get a lot out of it that way. But like, you know, when my friends and I would like hang out in my basement and like drink a 12-pack of Mountain Dew and just like play this not knowing anything really about soccer, like it was more just like that, like pick up and play. Like you could just give a controller to anyone, and it's a lot of like buttons and kind of like weird controls, but then like once you start playing it, like it just you can, it's a game you can play based on feel, and you don't really have to be like thinking about like any like super complicated button combinations or anything. It's, you know, you're just kind of going with your gut and the feel. And I think it uses the N64 control stick really well too. Like just the movement feels great. Like there's some N64 games where you're using the stick and you're like, yeah, this was not the lead platform for this game. Like this was meant to be played on like a PlayStation D-pad or something. But like here it's like, oh yeah, they really were thoughtful about like the feel of the game, which I know is something like Miyamoto cares a lot about. But in all those senses, it kind of reminds me a lot of like Smash Brothers, where it's like as deep as you want it to be. Like you can just keep going forever. But also if you want to just like drop the difficulty to easy, or if you want to just like play casually with your friends, like you can totally do that, like no matter how experienced you are or how much you know about football, etc. So it's a very like Nintendo-ish game in that way, which is pretty rare for like a sports sim.
Yeah, I think it actually like that. Yeah, it is rare, and it helps like I don't know, round out's not the right word, but it does help, you know, because we've talked about the drought. If we're thinking about it from the timeline perspective, we're a little warped the way we cover it from the exact date, but it does help kind of fill out the roster in like a nice way in like an area I feel like it doesn't really have covered yet in the timeline, you know. So I feel like it could give you some hope as I'm trying to like transport myself back into that time, you know. If you're playing at that time, it could give you some hope, like, okay, there's, you know, this is coming in August of the year, by the way, so like we're still, I mean, we're right, but I'll just set up our next episode is about GoldenEye. So there is some stuff coming that's gonna, like, for the rest of this year, like some big stuff, but I feel like this is kind of one of the first ones like later in the year where it's like, okay, like our last handful of episodes have been about some lower tier games, you know, some hidden gems for sure, but like some that, you know, I guess people weren't as thrilled about. So I feel like this is we're at a good starting point here for some exciting games that are coming out.
Ronaldinho success!
GoldenEye is next, which is very exciting. And you know, we have some new guests for our flashback, the main episode on it, but I think I've got both Jamie and Ryan on the hook we're going to do a ton of bonus content because there's so much to that game to like really get into and talk about. So I feel like I want to open it up. We're going to have like all our friends come on various episodes. We're going to get your personal anecdotes, but then we're going to focus in on certain, you know, areas of the game. And I'm really excited about that. So thank you for coming on this episode. And we look forward to having you both back on. Ryan, do you want to promote anything? Plug anything?
Yeah, I just run the Standard Definition Gaming Blue Sky account, and also my most recent side project is Standard Definition DVD Menus. on Blue
Yes.
Sky
Oof.
as well, which I gotta track down a GoldenEye DVD.
Yes, I would love to
and,
see that.
I gotta see those menus. I bet they're pretty good.
We just picked it up on VHS, which we already watched it a few weeks ago. But I'm thinking maybe we gotta get the
so
standard definition.
rewatchable. It
is, yeah. I feel like we're reliving it as we're playing it, but that's for next month. But Jamie, how about you? What would you like to promote? Anything?
Yeah, I should say thanks again for having me on the show. And I'm a big
Yes.
fan of standard definition gaming, by the way. I love that
thank
stuff.
you.
I'm the first one to like that stuff when it comes up. But yeah, I'm on Blue Sky as well, and X these days. So at Smithstock, SMITHST0CK. So yeah, I'm just on that. I'm a game designer by day, so I'm typically talking about game design or whatever game I've been playing recently. So just some general kind of screenshots and things like that.
Yes, both great follows on online for sure. Look out for their accounts. And yeah, we promote a lot of stuff, so we'll spare you. But I do want to say that we've done a couple little test streams on Twitch. We were playing some Blast Corps. That's one we're gonna do a follow up. We're gonna do a follow up episode because we've got even further than that's what I'm experiencing with these games. Is like we're playing them a lot, and like I feel like getting a good picture of them. But then we're like any game you get. It's like when you start, if you keep playing it, like it's gonna totally change your experience and perspective with it. We've had a lot of good stuff going on there with Blast Corps. We're gonna follow up and talk more about Blast Corps eventually. But just to say, we're on Twitch now. We've been streaming with our friends, and we're gonna start playing through Mario 64, which will be a lot of fun. We're doing it on. With using NSO, and what's nice about that is you can change who's player one. So we have a bunch of our friends over Discord who we take turns. We're gonna take turns collecting stars and whatnot, and it's just like a fun kind of, I don't know. It kind of simulates passing the controller back and forth amongst your friends, and I think Blast Corps definitely had that vibe. We had a lot of fun.
Somebody struggled with one thing. You'd hand it off to the Quaid Backlash master.
Everyone had their specialty.
The Drift King.
We were like the A team. We had like the Backlash expert. I don't think I had any skills, but I was just there. But other than that, yeah, we've got all our usual stuff, which we'll post in the description. We're on Blue Sky, and all that good stuff. But yeah, all right. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Jamie and Ryan, for coming. And we will see everybody next month and on. This is going to be a long running. We're almost going to become a GoldenEye podcast, but
GoldenEye year.
Yeah, we'll see everybody.
Like mini-series.
Yeah, mini-series for sure. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see everybody then. So, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Italy intercepts the ball, and you can see that it kind of smashed two sentences together.